Hi everybody, Steve here. Again, I apologize for the angle this light's gonna be, depending on where I'm at. It's gonna be hitting me kind of funny, but I have my computer screen hitting me in the face, so hopefully my face won't go to black. I just want to talk a little bit about the New Hampshire primary. When all is said and done, it ended up kind of like Iowa, even though caucuses are obviously a lot more unpredictable in terms of trying to poll. But, you know, just like Iowa, New Hampshire ended up being a lot closer than we expected, and Pete Buttigieg ended up finishing right on Bernie Sanders' tail. So even though Bernie still won by looks like 1.3%, won by almost 4,000 votes, they ended up with the same number of delegates. Both Pete and Bernie got 9 delegates. Amy Klobuchar got 6, and the rest got nothing. So Bernie wins by over a percent, by almost 4,000 votes, splits the delegates in New Hampshire, whereas in Iowa, him and Pete finish, even with the way that they were doing it, with the delegate equivalent thing, they finished in practically a tie, and yet Pete got one more delegate than Bernie. And of course, Bernie won the first run, and he still won the second alignment by some 2,500 votes. So, New Hampshire 2016, there wasn't really anything suspicious about it, and I'm not here looking for a conspiracy theory every primary that happens. I mean, I'm glad that Bernie won. I wish it was by more, but I've seen a couple other people. Someone posted a video on YouTube. I've seen comments online. People seeing stuff that I was also seeing and wasn't saying anything about, and I was like, I wonder if anybody else is noticing this, because I was tracking the new, I was going to say New Orleans, the New Hampshire numbers. I was literally tracking them, like refreshing on my computer every couple of minutes. I was doing it like, every other minute I was refreshing. So every time there was, a couple new precincts reporting, I was seeing it and seeing the shifts and trying to take screen captures to kind of see all of it. And a very, like, right out of the gate, Bernie kind of built a lead. Like, the moment I saw the first results reporting beyond the, like, midnight thing where people were like, Amy Klobuchar claims an early lead, and nobody mentioned that there was 27 total votes that had come through so far, so it wasn't a big deal. But the first time I checked them, when they were actually finally reporting precincts, Bernie already had like 1,000 vote lead. And then I'd refresh a couple minutes later, and it's like a 1,200. Then it's a 1,400. Then it's a 1,700. And pretty quickly he built a 22, 23, 24, 2,500 vote lead. Like, he was steadily, the first like 25-30% of the precincts reporting, the lead was steadily growing in the distance between him and Pete Buttigieg. And then it just stopped. I mean, he got to about a 3,000 total lead pretty quickly, and then won by less than 4,000 votes. So pretty much the last 70 or so percent that reported, him and Pete Buttigieg were suddenly in a dead heat with one another, yet early on, Bernie was steadily pulling away. Like, I thought he was going to win by about 8,000, 9,000 votes based on how the early voting was, and then just suddenly. But beyond that, there was so many moments that I noticed. It's like Bernie's leading over Pete is kind of stalemating. He's up by 2,800, then he's up by 2,750, 2,780. And then suddenly, boom, a couple precincts report, Bernie goes from being up by like 2,500 to being up by 4,000, this big bump, and then immediately within minutes, Pete would cut half that away. So every time Bernie suddenly got a big bump, Pete Buttigieg would get an immediate bump right after. Every time. It was uncanny. But when Mayor Pete got a bump right after Bernie, Bernie didn't get another bump afterwards. It was always to the benefit of Pete. So, Bernie is, okay, here we go. Now he's finally pulling away. He's got a 4,000 vote lead. And then it would stagnate and Pete would get closer. And then another bump. Okay, Bernie's up by like 5,000 votes now. Okay, now here's where Bernie pulls away. And then suddenly Pete's catching up again. In a place where, he wasn't polled to be sticking with Bernie, and yet here we are. Suddenly Pete Buttigieg is staying with Bernie. And of course, Amy Klobuchar surprised a lot of people. But that constant, like, Bernie could, every time Bernie started getting an advantage, Pete would immediately catch up, and yet that didn't reciprocate the other way. You know, if Pete started catching up, there wasn't if some bump that Pete had, Bernie would not get an immediate follow. And it was very strange how the results were going, especially since I know it's a different year, it's a different election, but a constant with Bernie Sanders was his weakest point in the primaries was at the start, and he always did better the further the primaries went on, and that was represented in Iowa. Pete Buttigieg for a while had a steady 30, 40 SDE advantage on Bernie, and Bernie kept closing the gap till in the end he was only 2 behind in that, and Pete Buttigieg actually had a lead in the popular vote pretty far, I think at 75% reporting or something like that. I think even at 85%, Pete Buttigieg actually had snagged a small lead in the popular vote, and then Bernie wins by about 2,500. So Iowa, even in the caucus, was representative of that. But we saw the opposite in many cases. We saw Hillsborough County, the biggest county in New Hampshire. Bernie was killing it there, and when he got a lot of those big sudden bumps on Pete Buttigieg, it was always in sync with when some more precincts started reporting out of Hillsborough County. And I mean, even when Hillsborough was only at 40% reporting or something, Bernie had bumped his lead up. And he was dominating. I actually, looking at the stills I had, at 36% reporting there, Bernie had a 7.16% lead over Pete Buttigieg in the county with the largest population. At 42%, it suddenly dropped to 4.27. He'd been holding it at about 6 to 8, all the way up until it got to about 40% reporting, and then that died away. By the time Hillsborough was finished reporting, Bernie had a measly 1.29 point lead over Pete Buttigieg. It was, a quarter of what it had been before. If that. It wasn't even a quarter. It's like a fifth of what it was at 36% reported. So Bernie's lead completely evaporated there, which I think is the primary reason that Pete was able to stick with them, was he closed that gap. As same in Merrimack County, which is another large county in New Hampshire. At 37% reporting, Bernie had a 4.55 point lead over Pete Buttigieg. At 58% reporting, it had dropped to 2.28. It had been cut in half. By the end, Bernie won it by less than 0.5%. He won it by 0.47. So those two big counties, Bernie steadily lost, which I think is the only explanation for why Pete stayed so close. Was the thing that usually works for Bernie didn't work, and in counties where he was dominating until we got to about 40% reporting, and then suddenly Pete took over. And it's interesting because a lot of the other counties that Bernie won, he's still holding this 3,500, 4,000 vote lead, and he actually Bernie extended his advantage in some of these counties right near the end, the last 15 to 20% reporting. Sorry, I have a cat clamoring for attention down here. It's a common thing. And for example, Cheshire County, Bernie had a pretty good sized lead for a while, but it kept getting chiseled down to about 6-7%, but then in the end he won by 10 points. Strafford County, he was holding a pretty solid lead that was kind of vacillating a little bit, but it was lingering in the 4 to 6% range, and at the end he won it by 7.23 points over Pete. Sullivan County, he actually had an early lead and then trailed Pete Buttigieg most of the county, and then kind of stole it back at the end and won by 2.62 points. Are any of these places not 100% reporting? Just thought I'd check. So Bernie, right near the end, was actually gaining advantages in the counties that he had the lead in, of course with the exception of Merrimack and Hillsborough County, where his leads were disintegrating. But even in Hillsborough County, Pete Buttigieg had it under 2 points, with still a lot left to report, so he didn't really gain much on Bernie right at the end. And yet in the counties that he won Pete Buttigieg won Carroll County by 1.87 points over Bernie. Well, let's make sure Bernie took second. I'm pretty sure he did. Yeah. Beat him by, 1 point. Okay, I'm done. Yeah, 1.87 points in Carroll County, 1.08 in Belknap County, and 3.86 in Rockingham County. Now, those advantages that he had at the end, those were pretty much the advantages he had most of the way. He pretty much was leading Belknap by about a point. He was leading Carroll by 1 to 2 points and won by 1.87. He was leading Rockingham by 3 to 4, and he won by 3.86. He didn't really gain much in the places that he won, and most of those places had most of their precincts reported long before Hillsborough was finishing in Cheshire and Coos County that Bernie won by 8.7. So it stands to reason that regardless of where vacillations were happening, by the time I stopped paying attention, because I got really sick, it was only at like 86% reporting when I got sick, and by then it was like after midnight on the West Coast, so I was going to have to go to bed early anyway. And Bernie was kind of steadily holding that, 3,500, 4,000 vote lead. Well, he increased his advantage in places that he won, and Pete didn't really, there was no places where Pete gained, but there was places where Bernie did. So I'm just trying to understand why Bernie didn't gain really any more of an advantage. I mean, I have a dry having to re-access the stuff I've saved, because I want to actually check the last, before I got sick with the norovirus, which is like getting food poisoning, but then someone put cocaine in it, so you're just a train wreck. And I started getting sick when it was still at like 80. I'm just glad that it got called for Bernie, because I wouldn't have known till, sometime the next day when I came out of my haze. But yeah, it looks like I started taking screen captures of the New Hampshire results at 5:54 p.m. West Coast time, because I got off work at 5. The last screen capture I took one at 12:30, so that's like right before I got sick. And at that time, 86.71% reporting, and Bernie was holding, it looks like, about a little over a 3,600 vote lead. So he had about a 3,618 vote lead. So yeah, 36-18, and in the end, when all is said and done, some final 13% reporting, and Bernie seems to be gaining a lot. Bernie won by, looks like, I'm even going to refresh this just to make sure the numbers don't change. Slowest freaking computer ever. It was a nightmare refreshing over and over again. But yeah, so Bernie won by, looks like 38, 43, 38-67. So when all is said and done, in that last stretch, dog's going crazy, Bernie only had a gain of, from, again, the last time I checked before I went to bed, and Bernie had these gains in all these places, and Pete didn't. Bernie only gained 249 votes, as opposed to how many Pete Buttigieg gained during that time. And that doesn't seem like enough to me, but again, this is something that people were noticing, is that every time Bernie got a sudden bump and that lead started to increase, immediately Pete closed the gap. And that was not represented at any other time in any other way when they were in this race between the two of them. It was like Bernie gained an advantage, Pete immediately caught up. I want to see if I can even find an example in here somewhere, because I know when Hillsborough was sitting at like 20% reporting, and then there was this sudden boom for Bernie, and then this closing of the gap by Pete Buttigieg. So when I first started, Bernie had about a 5-point lead, and it was 14% reporting. It was just kind of sitting there, nothing really going on. And then about 12 minutes later, it was at 16%, and Bernie's lead was kind of maintaining. And here, about another 15 minutes later, suddenly up to 36% reporting in Hillsborough, and Bernie had a 7.16 advantage in that county. And at this moment, Bernie had built his lead up to about a 4,500 vote lead at 52% reporting over Pete Buttigieg. Had a 4,500 vote lead. And yeah, he was kind of holding that for a while. You know, what happened? You know, here, I wish I could see the raw numbers. Yeah, now at 62% reporting, and he has about a 3,500 vote lead. Like, it was just evaporating. And there you see his hill, and it was bizarre. So now Pete's right on his tail. Now Bernie bumps it back to 4,000. Now it's like 4,100. And it looks again like he's pulling away. Back up to, here we go, 69% reporting. Bernie has almost a 4,500 vote lead on Pete. And yeah, then it drops to 42. Literally, how many more precincts were even reporting? The number of precincts reporting increased by 0.6%. And immediately Pete cut that 4,500 vote lead down to like 42. Yeah. And now it's back down to 3,500. I mean, it was just that quick that he would obliterate. Now it's back up at 70% reporting. Literally, only like 1.5% of all the precincts reporting. Bernie had a 4,500 vote lead that dropped to 35 to 30 and then grew back to 4,000 in just a small number of precincts. That's a lot of fluctuation. So yeah, now it's down to 4,300. Like, it just fluctuated so much, and there wasn't a lot of precincts reporting. And yeah, here we go, about 76% reporting. Bernie had about a 4,650, almost 4,700 vote lead. Yeah, still holding at 45. Yeah, still holding it at 76% reporting, still holding at 45. And then it goes from 76.08 to 76.41, 0.35 more precincts reporting in a small state like New Hampshire. And that lead went from about 4,550 to barely 4,000. It just plummeted. Just crazy fluctuation. Now suddenly it's less than 4,000, and we're just getting to 77. So yeah, Bernie's got less than a 4,000 vote lead at 77% reporting. Then it drops down to 35, under 3,500. This is all over the process of getting from 76 to 77% reporting. 78% reporting. Now it's barely it's about a 30, not even a 3,200 vote lead now for Bernie. So yeah, so then it's just kind of wavering. Get to 79, it's back up to 35. It's just bizarre. Now suddenly it's back up to 4,000. And that's where it kind of lingered when I got to the end. And that's the thing is, we were at pretty much 85% reporting by 9. We hit 85% reporting by 9 p.m. West Coast time. So it would have been midnight on the East Coast. So we were at 85% reporting, and Bernie holding about a little less than a 3,700 vote lead. So 85% reporting at midnight on the East Coast, and by my last check, 12:30, so it would have been 3:30 in the morning. So 3.5 hours later, they managed to get from 85 to 86.7% reporting. And in that time, not much changed. And they probably all of a sudden precincts just stopped getting reported. And it was stalemated, so, the state was called for Bernie, but the official results didn't get finished, it seems, till the middle of the night. I woke up the next day and was still kind of sick, but was able to see that they had finally finished reporting the rest of the precincts. But for some reason, for at least 3.5 hours, they could only get 1.5% more through. So they made sure it was pretty deep into the middle of the night before they finished getting all the results in. And Bernie got the state. Bernie's won the popular vote in both Iowa and New Hampshire, the only two states we've had so far. And yet Pete Buttigieg has a 1 delegate lead on him, because our system's garbage. So just, again, it seems every state there's something strange going on. And I'm not screaming conspiracy, I'm not screaming voter fraud, vote rigging. I'm just pointing things out that bug me. I'm not trying to escalate everything to a 10. Just acknowledging that, we have 2 states where Bernie was expected to kind of dominate, and then things kind of got a little weird, and both times it was to Pete Buttigieg specifically to his advantage. And specifically the second state where Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren horribly underperformed. Amy Klobuchar is suddenly, solidly in third, it would seem. Obviously we'll see how Nevada goes, we'll see how South Carolina goes. Polls for Bernie are looking really good right now. A poll just came out of Texas showing him in a lead. South Carolina, where Hillary beat him by like 37% in 2016, and he's only polling behind Biden by like, 7, 8 points, maybe 9. Bernie's holding a lead in California. Nevada's up next. It's right around the corner, and the most recent, of course, is another caucus, so... And, there's already this, they're going to use an iPad tool instead of an iPhone app, pretty much. So, I don't trust that at all. I don't know what the hell... I know what they're doing. They're just going to screw the whole thing up. A poll just came out showing Bernie's got almost a 20-point lead. Again, he's at 35% support in Nevada, and I think Joe Biden's second at 16%. And Pete Buttigieg is at like 10%. So, you can say Iowa, Pete Buttigieg was like 6-7 points back, so wasn't completely out of the realm of possibility that he could finish right up there at the top. But Nevada, he's polling, the most recent poll shows him polling at 10%. So if Pete Buttigieg pulls another racing the front runner to the finish like he has in Iowa and New Hampshire, I'm going to be substantially more suspicious if Pete Buttigieg has the kind of finish he did in Iowa and New Hampshire in Nevada, because he is polling so horribly there. So anyway, that's it. That's my look into New Hampshire, and kind of just something that isn't quite settling right with me. And again, like a lot of people, objectively, Bernie did not win by the amounts he was expected to win by. And it seems like whenever Bernie's expected to do, well by a certain margin, very seldomly does he ever quite reach that. But when it comes to other people, more establishment people, they always seem to kind of pull off what's expected of them, and oftentimes end up doing a little bit better. Isn't it interesting how those scales balance like that? So, that's it. Steve, on my Goats for Bernie page. See you guys later.